we'll go ahead and get started. Can you hear me in the back? Yes? Good, thank you, Andrew. I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to do my best to kind of project my voice, but I don't know how long this is going to last, so we'll see how this goes if I start trailing off. Anyway, I'm Carla Zoltowski. Hopefully you've been receiving weekly emails from me. I'm co-director of EPICS, and I also advise 3 teams, and I see some familiar faces: Camp Riley, the Glass team, and the Slack team. My background is electrical and computer engineering, and I apologize that a lot of the examples I provide are from ECE point of view. So I'll try and broaden that out a little bit. I have a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering, but my PhD is actually in engineering education. And I studied design and how students understood design. And both my background in ECE and my PhD work in engineering education really have informed me, plus working with hundreds of teams through the 11 years that I've been working with EPICS have really kind of informed what we talk about. And so I'll draw from that, and you'll probably hear me reference that a little bit. If you're really interested in the project management lecture, especially if you're taking this for 2 credit hours and you need additional lectures, you can watch that lecture. It's going on simultaneously right now, but we're recording both this lecture and that lecture. So if this is a topic you're interested in, or you just really want to add it to your skill base, you're more than welcome to actually watch that one as well. So I'll try and keep you informed of the other lectures that are happening if you haven't already taken a look at the lecture schedule. What was I going to say? Okay. So yeah, that is there. Oh, lectures, so they record them on Monday. By Wednesday afternoon, we usually have them posted. So it's not instantaneous. We're not live streaming onto a server or anything right now. But by Wednesday afternoon, if you're interested, it should be available. We will also post the PowerPoints from each of the lectures with the video. So even if you just want to see what was covered in the other lecture, feel free to do that. Or if you can't keep up while I'm talking, although there's probably not too many times where that happens. But if there is critical information you missed, you can also get that from the website as well. Okay. So if you did not get the weekly email, see me after this lecture. It was updated, the email lists were updated over the weekend with everybody who was registered as of Friday morning. So if you added the class after Friday morning and didn't get the email, that would be why. But as long as you were registered, you should have gotten it. I did send it to your team versus another email alias we had used. So that's actually one way. When you got the email this week, you should see your team name in front of the email. And that is assurance to you, actually, that you're on your team's email list. So just be aware of that. For new students in EPICS, there's 5 required lectures that you either need to come to here at 4:30 or watch if you have a schedule conflict. And this is the second of those 5. For 1 credit hour students, after you have 5 lecture credits, you've satisfied that. You don't have to come to any more lectures. So we're going to have, 3 more lectures after this one in this room, and then we won't meet in this room after that. Okay? Again, if there are skill sessions or other things you want to do because you want to put them on your resume, you need them for your project, you just want to learn about that, you are welcome to do as many lecture credits as you want. But the requirement is 5 for 1 credit hours. Yes?
Is there a place where the lectures are listed that we can check in advance?
Yes, they were in the lecture schedule that was part of the syllabus that you received, and they're online. and I believe I provided the link in the email. Okay? So if you can't find it from one of those three places, let me know. But yes, it is posted. I think a number of them are already in my EPICS as well. So that's a fourth place even you can find out about them, but not all. Okay? Any other questions, concerns? Because if you have a question about what's going on, it probably means somebody else's. Yes?
So I've heard that we can do those sessions instead of the lectures that allowed, or do we have to go to the first 5 and then we can do those supplemental and stuff like that?
Really the requirement is that you come to the first 5. One of the things is, since this is a design course and we're really focused on design, it's important that you kind of learn more about design, but then after that you can add to it. So, yes?
You initially signed up for 1 credit hours, but you ended up doing stuff for that's like worth 3 credit hours. Did you end up helping out, or just?
You can change your registration. I would talk to your advisor, and both your team advisor and your academic advisor, just to check with them. But if they're both in agreement, yeah, then yes. And we've actually had a few students who go from 1 to 2 credits. When they realize how much they're investing anyways, they might as well get the credit for it. So, question over there, yes?
How do you get credit for watching the lectures?
So you go to my EPICS, and then there's a makeup button, but you have 2 weeks to make it up. So actually through today is the makeup period for the first lecture. And the deadline for each of the lectures is actually in that lecture schedule. So you can find out how much you have, because then we try to give extra time for breaks and things like that. So, but you should be able to do that. There was a bug in my EPIC, well, the date was wrong, but I fixed it. Somebody alerted me to that, so I fixed it. So yes. Go ahead.
Are we notified if you know that we attended these? Because like if there's a mess up, how do we,
So what you'll see is that the attendance will be posted in my EPICS within about a week or 2. So again, it's not an automatic process. We have to turn these in. They generate a file. We have to upload the file to my EPICS. So if in 2 weeks from now you don't see lecture credit, let us know. But you'll probably see it before that. But usually give us 2 weeks, at least a week, if not 2 weeks. It will not be posted tomorrow. We keep all the Scantrons. We can go back, so maybe an ID number was wrong and that's why it didn't go in, and we can verify whether or not you had credit. Okay? Yes?
There are 2 skill sessions on 11 September at the same time. I want to attend both of them, so is there any makeup skill sessions or anything like that?
I would contact the 2 TAs that are offering to see if they're going to offer it at a different time, or if there's a way, because I did actually just hear that they accidentally scheduled it on top of each other. I don't know if one of them's going to try and move. But you could get the information from them afterwards too. Okay? Any other questions? All right. So we're really going to talk a little bit more at a high level about design, and also start going through some aspects of the design process document. So I don't know if you realize that was homework for today. If you haven't looked at the design process document yet, I recommend that you do that. And I can show you where that is on the website. Let me see if I can manage this. So if you go to the EPICS, it's like a 30-some page document that we've started. So a lot of good links are on the right-hand side, but I almost always go to current students because everything you wanted to know about EPICS is here and more. That's part of the problem. We are in the process of redesigning the website to align with the new Purdue look, but that'll be an ongoing process. Anyway, like this week in EPICS, that's the weekly email. There's a whole bunch of different things. The design process PDF is this document. And should be, I would recommend reading through this so that you can see what's here. But really it should be at a high level so that you know if you need to go back that this document has that information. So we're going to work through some of the aspects of that and talk about two aspects of design, not only the process, but the mindset related to design. We'll talk a little bit about design and project management, but not so much this time. So one of the things I've realized is that when we first started EPICS probably 10 years ago, very few people had actually design experience coming into EPICS. But how many of you have already had some design courses? Okay, a fair amount. So the challenge for you is to learn, so there's lots of different design processes. One of the things is to figure out how this aligns with your prior design experience. Okay, we're not going to go into the nitty-gritty detail of every aspect of design, but there are certain things we do in EPICS and that we think are important when we do community-driven design that may be different from some of your other design experiences. So the challenge for the people who have already had those design experiences is to think about how this fits. For those of you who are new to design, this will be a model to think about design. And your challenge for your future will be, how does this fit with other design processes? So again, process and mindset. They're related, but there's actually some aspects that will reflect more of a philosophy that we think is important, and then more tools or processes, steps that you can engage with this. So as I said, there's lots of different design processes. This is an example of one that has 5 steps that has been used widely. Here's one from construction engineering, shows the cyclical process, a spiral kinds of things. There are some from Germany that have hundreds of steps in them. So there's lots of different design processes, models that are out there. There is a commonality, though, among design processes that kind of communicates what happens in design. So there's a knowledge about design that is actually in addition to your disciplinary design that you're taking. So you're learning about, different aspects, maybe different engineering fields, different liberal arts, science, but there's also a knowledge related to design, and so that's what we're going to explore and add, hopefully, to what you already know. So this is the EPICS design process model. And we have a figure that means to represent. What are some things that this model communicates to you? What are some aspects? What do you think it's trying to communicate, at least? Yes?
Lots of iterations.
Lots of iteration, absolutely. What else?
Everything's centered around the stakeholders.
Everything's centered around the stakeholders, absolutely. Yes?
The process never really ends.
Right, the process never really ends, absolutely. Yes? I'm sorry, what? Selling the idea is important, absolutely. Good. So these are the things, and as you can see, this has a little bit different emphasis than some of the other design process models that you might have seen. It is very human-centered. We call our stakeholders, we put the people that we design for and with, we call them stakeholders. So those are not just the people that have funded your project. Those are the users. They may be the parents of the kids you're designing for. It's a really broad group, but it's human-centered because it needs to start with the needs, and that it really does reflect a philosophy of that. So I showed you the document. This is just pointing to the document where that is. At the heart, the other aspect besides the people is the focus on action or prototyping. So hopefully from the wallet exercise, I think, how many people did the wallet exercise? Most everybody? Okay. One of the things about the wallet exercise really is the focus on action. So I don't know if you've heard of the term design thinking. It's very popular. Stanford teaches design thinking, IDEO, and other really kind of design firms use what they call design thinking. But the thinking part really is a misnomer. Really, design is action. And so when you think about doing design, you should be thinking about what you can do, not just thinking. Because often we think a lot about or make assumptions about what our users might want or need, but we really need to do things to actually verify whether or not that's correct. So really focusing on the prototypes related to that. In that document, there are different phases of design. Now this is different. One of the reasons why design is hard is it's not cookbook. It's not simply algorithmic that you just go through and follow a set of series of specific steps. You may have to go back and look at them again. So one of the things that we've done as we've described design is we've identified what the goal is of the different phases. So you might need to do, and in this, here are the tasks that you might need to complete to actually achieve your goal. Your project may require other things that we don't have listed. Your project may require that you revisit some of this or do things a couple of times, iterate on them. Okay, but you need to achieve the goal. And so thinking about what the goal is of what you're trying to do, and not simply, I just have to get these tasks done. Because if you just think about only the task and not what you're trying to achieve, you're likely not to have a very satisfactory design in the end. Okay, so be thinking about this. So like for the project identification goal is really just to identify a specific compelling need to be addressed. Our way of looking at this is at a very high level. So this is not detailed design. This is not even having a very big list of specs. But it's a general agreement that we have this need and a general way of approaching it. So it could be for Habitat for Humanity, you've decided you're going to design the home, not build the home. Okay? That may be that kind of scope. So it's really kind of broad scope related to that. All right? In industry, we're drawing from industry quite a bit. They use gates in industry to do checks on projects before they go to the next phase of the project and before they put any more money in the project. We are also drawing from gates, and ours a little bit less formal than what they are in industry. In industry, they're very formal. Your project will not get any more funding if you don't pass a gate. But we're going to also look at that. So the other thing you need to do is you look at the design process as it relates to your project. Have you met the gate? Should it continue? Can you pass the requirement to go on to the next phase? So really thinking about this. I know that when you get a project, you just want to start building and working on it. But if we don't invest appropriately at the beginning in some of these early phases of design, we're going to miss the mark. So it is important to make note of this and make sure your project is satisfying it. If you're new to your project, you're in the perfect position to be able to ask those questions. Where is some of this prior work? Has it been done? So the specification development phase, really the goal is actually to identify what is needed, not necessarily how. Again, one of the biggest mistakes is we tend to jump and want to figure out how to do it versus figuring out what needs to be done first. So specification is a few iterations through getting those big, broad customer requirements and figuring out a set of measurable specifications for your design. This is a difficult part, and people tend not to want to spend as much time, but it's actually really critical. This should be the basis of the rest of the work that you do. This is the basis for evaluating and testing your project. This is how your customer says whether or not what you're going to produce is acceptable or not. So really getting to that. This is also the great opportunity to look at what else is out there. Because one of the things that, if we identify an existing project that actually meets the need, then it really isn't an appropriate EPICS project. We actually are going to have to pivot on a very project for one of the teams I'm working on. Because when we started digging a little deeper to figure out what the need was, there was an app that did it already, and we don't need to do the project. So, and that's actually an okay solution, because we don't want to be spending our time on things that can already just be done. We want to be able to provide the service and the opportunity that isn't already available. So, again, these are just some things to look at. Then conceptual design is a little bit different phase where you start to then explore how. How are you going to actually do it? And there's lots of different tools. This is a phase in which you usually broaden this, what we call broaden the design space, to think of multiple ways of doing it. Like when you had to sketch 5 ideas really quickly for your wallet, you were starting to do some conceptual. And then at the end of conceptual, I'll actually just pick the most appropriate based on the specifications that you've already identified. Okay? So that is the goal for conceptual. And then detailed really gets into implementing it. What specific chip might you use, approach, model, configuration, what detail do you need, what algorithm. That's where you actually start doing that. The other thing that often happens here is doing risk analysis and or considering, at least for your design, a DFMEA. And that is a design for failure modes effect analysis. So what the goal is here is, if we can anticipate what the failure is there a way to actually design something, modify our design to mitigate that potential failure? But you don't want to wait till you're already all done with your project. You want to do that as soon as possible to do that. So we have it here, but it actually may be appropriate once you know how you're going to implement something to do that really actually very early in the detailed design phase. And then delivery. I think one of the greatest things about what we do in EPICS is actually we deliver projects to our community partners. And that is, I don't know if anybody's had that opportunity to deliver a project, but it's really, really cool to be able to do that. The one other thing, though, is we need to make sure that our project partner can be successful. So when we think about it, it's not just finishing the project, but it's equipping and making sure our community partner can be successful with the design that we've actually come up with for that. So this really is making sure that we have all the things in place. So it might be considering training that's necessary, user manuals, other things that can help with actually their success. The other thing is that within EPICS, probably heard us say this, we really are focused on partnerships with our community partners. And so we also provide service if needed for projects that might break. I know that I have a couple of teams that are looking at projects that were in the field that need either some kind of maintenance or repair. And so bringing them back and actually doing that. The other thing is having the discussion to make sure that your project actually is meeting the need and just providing that long-term support. Because that is the one thing that's great about EPICS versus some other, we're not just a drive-by service learning course. We have partnerships, and it's really important for us to support our community partners with long-term service and maintenance for them. And then again, retirement or redesign. Really like you to think about doing the minimal viable product kind of approach to what you're doing in design, and then thinking about redesigning it or coming out with version 2.0 versus trying to necessarily think about having every bell and whistle in your product. Those often take a very long time and don't often succeed. So really thinking about small iterations of design and what can we produce that's actually going to provide value, but then really building on that. So why is design difficult? So, I mean, it engages, when you look at problem solving, the taxonomy of that, design is probably the most, or one of the most complicated, complex ways of thinking, or thinking skills, cognitive skills that are needed with that. As you will hear, there are so many ideas to kind of manage. So we've talked about specifications, right? What are some other things do you think we have to worry about when we're doing design? Yes? Has it been done before? Yes. Cost, yes.
Will it work?
Will it work? What are some other things? Yes. Time? Yep. What are some other? Well, would they buy it or use it? Right. Yes. Yeah. Can you replicate it? Can you make it again? Yes. What are some other things? Is it realistic? Right. Yes. Absolutely. Does it meet state and national regulations? What about usability? What about understanding the context in which, and some of the things that you mentioned are related, the cultural aspects. Some of you guys are working on global projects, understanding how projects fit within the global culture. Ethical issues that might come up. Safety. All of these different things. So you're trying to manage, how do I make it work, make it safe, make it economical, make it fun to use, and deliver it on time, right? There's a lot of things. Design is difficult. I'm not sure that there's many things that go from idea to actual implementation. That is a really complicated process. And often in design, we're focused on maybe one aspect of it. But since we do our service learning course that deliver real projects to real people, we really have to get all of that right. So it is complicated. So the design process document and the tools that are in there are ways to help manage all of the aspects of what you do in design. So it, because there's literature that supports, I don't know if this is still current, that you can maintain 7 things in your mind at one time. So are there ways to offload some of the things related to design so that you can manage that? So the tools help manage aspects of design related to that. It also requires both different kinds of thinking between both divergent and convergent. So it's not like if you're only really good at one thing, big ideas or ideation, you actually need to be doing both of those things related to design. And the problems are ill-defined and complex. There's multiple answers often. So long, I don't know if most of you probably, in the past, there's often been one right answer, right, to a problem. And if you don't get that, then you don't get it right. Design and the kinds of problems that we address, there's often many different answers. Some are better than others, but there may not be only one way. There's certainly not one way to do it. And so really managing all of that is also complex. So, okay. So yeah, the other thing is the divergent and convergent thinking. There are times in design and in the process where you're going to have to expand and actually do divergent thinking on increasing the way that you think about it. And sometimes this increases the complexity. So this is a brainstorming, ideation kinds of things. Now, we have conceptual design phase where that's kind of the focus of that. But you actually may need to do this at various points. Say like you're in detailed design and you run across a problem. You actually may need to brainstorm multiple solutions, and then you have to do Convergent and pick one of those. Realizing what's appropriate at what point in your design is actually really is important, because it can be really frustrating when you're almost close to delivering and then you have somebody on your team who wants to does all this ideation and wants to change everything at the very end, right before you're delivering. Unless it's absolutely needed, that's really not recommended. So understanding when these different kinds of thinking are appropriate in design and using the one related to that. We have compiled some different resources. So if I go back to the website, the other document that was there so I showed you design processes before. Design process resources has different tools that we have drawn from throughout and kind of pulling together things that we have found useful in design. So it's just important to know that this is here and that you can draw from it. Two of the big ones are the Stanford D School, where they have really taught design thinking, a lot of innovation related to that. And then IDEO, which is that international design firm. They have a toolkit that you can draw from. Both Stanford and IDEO have kind of tools. They've made their tools available and given examples of how it can be applied to a really wide variety. We have some other things here that you can use if you're doing stakeholder analysis, brainstorming, etc. So this is just another resource that you can use for that. All right. So just a little bit. Any questions first on the processes? So next week and the week after, we're going to go through the design process and highlight, kind of show an example of how these are applied to a project so that you can see some examples of that. So we'll go through the rest of the design process related to that. We'll also hint a little bit, but I want to be explicit, I think, about the mindsets, or at least the philosophy that drives what we do in EPICS. And so I don't know if you talked about these explicitly from the wallet exercise, but really some of the ways of thinking about design is really that focus on action, showing, not telling, because wasn't there a lot more value when you actually had that prototype or that sketch that you could show your partner that you were designing for versus if I were to describe what it might be? I mean, I know for me, if people really want to know how, if something's too heavy or how I like something, if I can interact with it, I'm going to know a lot better. So really the mindset is just focused on that. I had some teams talk about how they came up with a really innovative design because they actually just started talking about what they needed about their life in general, and that provided them the insight to actually come up with something really innovative for their partner. So very often those kind of incidental experiences or interactions with the people we're designing for are really important. We have a class here, EPICS summer class, where it's an intensive, immersive class, where we're here on campus for a week, but the team is actually working to design and make a camp more accessible for kids with disabilities. So the second week of class, we actually go to the camp and hang out with the campers. We go to meals with them. We go to their activities. So we're cooking hobo dinners on the campfire with them. We are going down and to the boat with them. We're going to their art class with them. We're eating meals. The insight we get from just spending that time with them is actually invaluable. It has informed all aspects of the design. Watching them participate in other activities that are related, but actually those parts are really critical. So really encourage you to think about, how can I interact with my community partner or understand my user in a way that might be getting feedback on your project? But there's even value of just going and watching and hanging out and seeing how they interact with other parts of the classroom, for example. Or how they do this activity without the project that you're proposing. And just spending that time, because that actually provides so much more insight to what you're doing with design. Some of the other, hopefully, mindsets, and these are really related. The experimentation, well, as I said, the focus on design as action and not as thinking is really an important part related to design. I challenge you to make as many prototypes as possible. I mean, who would have thought you could have come up with a prototype in 7 minutes? Think about what you could do, what you were able to do with a 7-minute prototype. Use that same kind of strategy in your everyday interactions with your community partner or in your design. So actually, how can you do that and really embrace that experimentation? The other aspect is that then it allows you to get data and feedback. Too often I hear somebody say, well, I think it should be blah, blah, blah. But really what you need to be saying is, I presented these options to my community partner, and they preferred this one, or they were able to use this one easier. Those are the aspects that I think are really important. And think about, how can I gather data actually from my community partner or my users versus what I just happen to think about it. Because once you are a designer, you no longer have the same perspective. You are informed. So it's not like you know how it should work. So you can't really test it yourself. You need someone who's not familiar with it to be able to test it and give you that feedback related to that. Again, really just the bias towards action. I think these are all really related. And really think about how you can draw from this radical collaboration. So I think maybe the D School at Stanford, maybe a few other places. But your experience in EPICS is actually unique in that we've drawn from 70 different majors. So this is a great opportunity to get a bunch of different perspectives. I can tell you our alumni, so we did a survey, an actual study of the alumni of EPICS. And one of the most important things they talked about was learning to work on multidisciplinary teams. That it helped them to appreciate the different perspectives, and it helped them to be able to negotiate language across disciplines, and all of those different things. So it also evidence has shown that it makes design better. So not only should this be a great opportunity for you, but it should be good for our community partners. The other kind of philosophy or mindset is thinking about things to make them as universal or accessible as possible. Now, universal or inclusive design is not just designing things for people with disabilities, but it actually has a marketing strategy that thinks, how can I make my market as large as possible? But if you design something that only certain people with certain mobility or cognitive abilities or dexterity can use, you've eliminated some of your potential market as well. The other thing is that from the Camp Riley point of view, is that we wanted to have not equal, separate but equal. we really wanted to have a way that was the same for all the campers to participate, or that could accommodate the widest variety possible. Camp Riley has an amphitheater that, and I suppose maybe this room kind of really doesn't pull it off. No, I don't think it does. So if you use a wheelchair, where can you sit in this room? Yep, those few seats. So the amphitheater at Camp Riley that they designed, you can sit anywhere. It's wheelchair accessible every single level of it. And then there are just seats that pull down. So it's not even like only wheelchairs can be in one section and the people who use seats are in another. It's totally integrated with that. So really thinking about how can we do a design that really embraces this philosophy related to that. We'll go a little bit more into that, but there are some basic ways of thinking about, and these align with usability. So if you think about universal design, it really is, or inclusive design. If you do a good job on some of these aspects, then you're going to make it as available as possible. OXO, that company, I don't know if you've bought any kitchen supplies from them. They're known for their universal or inclusive design. So they've actually have measuring cups, for example. I don't know if you use measuring cups very often, probably not very much right now. But if you were to fill it up for most measuring cups, and I was going to try and figure out how much water was in my measuring cup, what do you need to do? You have to get down, right, and see eye level to actually see what it is. Well, they design ones that you can just look down and the measurements are at the top. So it's really easy to determine how full the measuring cup is. So it's really just really increasing use with that. So these are ways to be thinking about, as I'm designing, is it as inclusive as possible? So that's a philosophy we really want to bring into that. All right. So big ideas of design. These are the things, yes?
Can you go back to the principles slide real quick?
Sure. Did you have a question or you just weren't finished? Get them all down? Yeah. Yes?
I didn't participate in the wallet exercise. I'm not sure what that is.
Okay, so the wallet exercise, who wants to explain what that is? Anybody? Yes? Huh?
I just have the same one.
Oh, you have the same? Oh, okay. So the wallet exercise is actually something from D-School. And you go through a rapid cycle of, well, several cycles, actually 7 iterations of the design process in about 60 to 90 minutes. So you might, if you're interested, might mention it to your advisor about doing it. I know a few teams are planning on doing it this week if you haven't done it already. So, but it actually, you design a wallet for your partner is what the question is. And first we have people start and they almost always design the wallet for themselves. You know, who are they designing for? Yourself, right? Then you have to design for your partner and you interview them. And then you ask more questions. Then you figure out what the basic need is. Then you come up with different designs, sketches. Then you actually prototype it in 7 minutes. So it gets you through that cycle in like 60 to 90 minutes real quick, but it actually produces a lot of information. All right, we'll hit on these a little bit more when we talk about usability and some other aspects related to that. So these are the big ideas. Human-centered, it's iterative. You have to make decisions along the way, but there's tools to be able to do that. There's times where you're expanding and convergent and divergent thinking, and really this importance of prototyping. It's one of the best ways to communicate to your community partner is actually showing them that. And it also does feasibility. So the homework that you've got, ask some questions. So one of the things I think that's been discussed in EPICS lectures or maybe in your teams is that you have to have reflective thinking or reflection or critical thinking in your the work that you produce, your individual documentation. Now, some of you, I think, in maybe the first year class are getting maybe some prompt questions every week. Some of you may be having questions that your team leader or project manager gives you. That's fine. This is yet another opportunity for you to be able to demonstrate what you know and learn, okay? So it wasn't I just sat in this lecture, maybe I slept, maybe I was really just, catching up on Twitter. What did I learn? And how is it going to impact my project? We have found that if you look at these questions and try and answer these 4 questions related to a topic. So what have I learned about human-centered design? What did I learn? How did I learn it? Why is it important? What will I do different? This is a great framework and will set you up really well when it's time for grading of your individual notebook, okay? So your questions, and these are just things to write in your notebook, okay? It's not something you're going to have to turn in next week. The TAs will look for evidence of this when they grade your notebooks. Usually week 8 that we do that. But many teams next week are going to do a quick look, first look at your notebooks to give you feedback so you can improve on them if you need to. So answer these questions. All right? These are on the half sheet of paper that we handed out. So for attendance, if you haven't already done this, sorry, can you just be quiet? I really have no voice hardly left. Put in your name and your ID. You don't have to worry about section. We're not even going to use that. True for question number 1. That's a secret answer that you need. And then sign it. Hand it to either Shankar or myself. Yes. You didn't get them? Okay, they're in the back right there. I have a couple right here. All right, have a great week.